Chair Howard, would you like to move your bill in front of the committee?
Yes, Chair Agbaje, so moved.
Okay, I also see that you have an author's amendment. Before we move that DE1 amendment, did you want to explain the amendment briefly?
Yes, Chair Agbaje, the DE1 just gets the bill into the shape we'd prefer it in with consultation with stakeholders.
Thank you, Chair Howard. With that, I move the DE1 amendment to amend House File 11 to the shape the author wants it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, your bill is amended. Please, Chair Howard, proceed.
Thank you, Chair Agbaje and members of the committee. This bill, House File 11, the Bring It Home bill, is a bill that brings forward a solution that matches the scope of the crisis that Minnesotans are facing by ensuring that everyone can afford the roof over their head. And first, I want to thank Beacon Interfaith Collaborative and Lee Blondes in particular for beginning this conversation and building a statewide coalition to move this vital bill forward and to have this conversation about a big solution to have big impact here in the state of Minnesota. And here's why it's so important. As we've heard in this committee so far this session, there are over 500,000 Minnesotans who are paying more than 30% of their income in their housing. And more than 200,000 Minnesotans are paying more than 50%. And this crushing weight of housing is having serious negative impacts with evictions on the rise, housing instability for families. In Hennepin County last year, family homelessness was up more than 200%. And the ripple collateral consequences of Minnesotans not being able to afford their homes can be seen in depressed ability for families to earn a living, poor health outcomes, poor educational outcomes, and the list goes on. Some Minnesotans do have access to a housing voucher through the federal government that provides assistance and housing stability. And for those Minnesotans, that voucher is a lifesaver. But the reality is only 1 in 4 Minnesotans who qualify, who are eligible for a housing voucher, actually receive one. And that's because of persistent underinvestment by the federal government in housing. We've heard from folks in this committee that have talked about years-long waiting lists for folks to access these housing vouchers. And what this bill would do, the Bring It Home bill, would create a state-based rental assistance program to fill this gap so that everyone who qualifies for a federal housing voucher would receive one. This bill is the right solution at the right time, and we have the opportunity to make sure that we're addressing our historic economic challenges that Minnesotans are facing. To the specifics of the bill, the plan is elegant in its simplicity because we rely on the existing infrastructure of local housing authorities who already understand local needs to manage and distribute funds in an easy, seamless manner. The legislation would fill the gap for hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans who qualify for the voucher, bringing stability to renters, landlords, and communities. A couple other pieces I would highlight. We include language to make sure that we're equitably delivering these resources across the state because this is a statewide problem. The language also creates flexibility so that this program can be tailored to meet the needs of Minnesotans and be administered in a way that works well for Minnesotans and landlords. I liken this to taking the elements of the Section 8 program that we know work well, but having the flexibility to make it work even better. And again, because we're using existing housing authorities, we're not setting up a large-scale, brand-new, state-based program, a rental assistance program. And in this way, we're able to more efficiently deliver resources to Minnesotans to help them afford their housing. Members, no single policy initiative can do more to directly eliminate homelessness than this one. Because when rent is more manageable, budgets stretch further and families can afford their essentials. And a word about the cost. You have the fiscal note that estimates the cost of this bill at $2 billion per year. Yes, that is a big number. But I want folks to take a second and process that, what that means, that for $2 billion we could functionally end homelessness in Minnesota. That's a policy choice. That's a policy proposition for us to consider. And what is not in the fiscal note is the ripple benefits of creating a Minnesota where everyone has access to stable housing. Our state would need to spend significantly less on things like the renter's credit or other social programs. Shelter, county services could be reduced significantly. Economic activity would increase because Minnesotans would be more able to work and spend money in their communities. and we would see better achievement in schools from our kids. We'd see better health outcomes, and again, the links and the intersections of the positive benefits of a proposal like this go on and on. Members, the reality is the state spends less than 1% of its budget on housing, and it's this consistent underfunding that has played a huge role in creating this housing crisis that's widened racial gaps, prevented our state from progress in so many ways. And so this proposal helps us break out from the status quo and deliver a solution that meets the scope of the problem. The stability of home touches on every aspect of our lives, and this proposal would create a guaranteed foundation that every Minnesotan could afford the roof over their head. And I look forward to the discussion and the testimony on the bill this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Chair Howard. We will move on to testifiers. The first on my list is Lee Blons. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Vice Chair Abage and members of the committee. My name's Lee Blons, and I'm the CEO of Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative, one of the organizations leading the Bring It Home Minnesota campaign. Bring It Home Minnesota is supported by all of the major housing organizations in the state. As Representative Howard said, it's a simple but profound investment in the stability of home for all Minnesotans. This rent support makes up the difference between what it costs a landlord to provide a decent apartment and what a family can afford to pay for rent. It's a win-win for landlords and tenants. Very simple. What makes it transformational is bringing this home for all Minnesotans. We need to create a solution as big as the problem. We are asking you to truly grapple with the scale of the problem of affordable housing in our state. Over 200,000 households, counting children, that's over 500,000 Minnesotans, who live with housing insecurity every month. This is a statewide problem. As our handout illustrates, over a third of renters in almost every county in Minnesota cannot afford their rent. This housing policy is the only investment that's guaranteed to deliver affordable housing to every corner of the state. This will be transformational for your communities, for your constituents. It will deliver affordable housing to every House and Senate district in the state. Imagine what it means to have a home that's constantly at risk because you're paying 40 or 50 or 60% of your income toward rent every month. Any one problem, a few less hours on the work schedule, a car repair, and illness can plunge a family into housing instability. When my son was young, around 6 years old, he told my husband that my job was more important than his because I help people. My husband, who's a psychologist, explained to him, Mommy helps people on the outside and I help people on the inside. And Tyrone said back to him, Daddy, don't you know that when you help people on the outside, you also help them on the inside? I've worked in affordable housing my whole life, and it is so painful to see a hard-working single mother struggle to provide for her children, working 2 or 3 jobs to pay the rent. Or seniors, like my brother-in-law, who's working a job at 78 years old to afford the rent. He's left wondering what happens when his health deteriorates. I believe in my heart and soul that a stable home is the most important thing that we can provide to relieve the stress and fear gripping our communities. Some people will say that we can't afford Bring It Home Minnesota. But let's be clear, it's not expensive per person. It's because of the number of people who need help that we get the fiscal note that we do. I say that we can't afford to not make this investment in the health and stability of our communities. We have a wonderful rent subsidy program, Homework Starts with Home, to help families with school-aged children at risk of homelessness. Last year, it helped 191 families, a fraction of the need. Homework starts with home. Do we truly believe that? Then how do we leave so many children in the state without a stable home? We spend around 25% of our state budget on education. And as Representative Howard said, we spend less than half of 1% of the state budget on housing. If you increase that investment to around 6% of the state budget, you end not only homelessness, but housing instability for all Minnesotans. Just think about the educational impact on children that would stay in the same school throughout the year. Our largest line item is Health and Human Services. We understand that health outcomes are driven more by your zip code than by the acute care you receive in a hospital. Homelessness and housing insecurity has become something that pediatricians have started to ask parents about in their health screenings. Imagine what it will mean for the physical and mental health in our state if everyone had a stable home. One last closing thought for you. When Beacon opened one of our supportive housing communities for young people experiencing homelessness, a young woman who had gotten a key to her new apartment had not spent the night in that apartment. And when staff asked her why not, she said, "My friend Tamika doesn't get her key until today. We've survived on the streets together for the past 5 months, and I couldn't leave her behind." What a message for us adults. Let's not leave anyone behind. Let's bring it home for all Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll move on to the next testifier. The next testifier on the list is Heather Alden. Please introduce yourself for the committee and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, Mr. Chair Howard and members. Thank you, Mr. Chair Howard, for bringing forward this bill. My name is Heather Alden. I am a social worker in St. Paul Public Schools and supervisor of our Project REACH program, which supports all of the students and families in St. Paul Public Schools who are experiencing homelessness, in foster care, and those who may be precariously housed. Increased stability for families equals increased stability for students. When families can pay their rent and then have money for food, utilities, medical expenses, child-related expenses, then they're able to stay in their homes and anchor themselves in a community and provide stability for their children. Children's stability opens avenues for academic attainment and educational growth over time. Safe, stable, and affordable housing during childhood sets the stage for later success in school. Children are profoundly affected by their environment during key developmental stages. Chaos in their neighborhood, frequent moves, exposure to pollutants, and unhealthy conditions inside their home all leave a deep and lasting impression. When housing consumes too much of a household's budget, kids may not have enough nutritious food to eat or ready to learn. Teachers see the ramifications of these conditions all too clearly in the classroom. Currently, there are 931 students identified as homeless in St. Paul Public Schools. Let me say that again, 931 students today. Those are children birth to 5 in our early childhood, those are children in school, and those are children in transition. Many of these parents are working 1 and 2 jobs and just had life happen. A car breakdown, a house fire, a lost job, underemployment, and they ran out of options. Rental assistance would allow families to have an option to provide housing stability for their children and open avenues for educational stability and attainment. Rental assistance could ensure that all Minnesota children have a safe, secure place to sleep and give them the stability they need to succeed in school. Rental assistance could help reduce racial inequities and the shameful housing disparities that hold Black, brown, and Indigenous communities in our state. Rental assistance could help communities strengthen by making sure their families can participate in their community and their children thrive, which would help Minnesotans thrive for generations to come. For those who have lived in poverty and experienced homelessness in their lifetime, that is trauma, which remains in one story always and is never an experience a parent would want to repeat for their child. For those who have experienced homelessness, they know the stress of not having a place to stay, food to eat, watching the weather, and fear of safety coupled with the lack of access to medical care and educational stability. For this, the opportunity for rental assistance can create an opportunity to forgo that happening to many of our residents in Minnesota and rewrite the narrative for those who live with this in their life's journey. I would encourage you to please pass House File 11, the rental assistance bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next testifier on the list is Jorlene Bryant. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Giving honor to Chair Howard, members of committee, my name is Geraldine Bryant. I am here today as a resident of Aon. I have been asked to speak about the importance of passing House File 11 bill. This bill is designed to help low-income individuals and families who spend more than 30% of their income on rent. It would help diversified community. I grew up in Mississippi. My mother was a sharecropper. And when the landlord decided he wasn't going to farm anymore, you didn't have a place to stay anymore. It would have been beneficial to have a bill like House File 11. Today is my birthday. And I am 75 years old. And to this day, when the landlord decides he doesn't want to own your building anymore, you don't have a home anymore. After my husband and I divorced, I lived at a shelter. I worked as a caretaker there to pay the rent for my room. I also worked at Minneapolis Community and Technical College as a clerical worker to help with food, bus money, and those things. Eventually, I found out that Section 8 would help me pay the rent if I applied. From the time I put my name on the list to the time I got the voucher, it was a little bit over 5 years. It was a long time to wait. But my Section 8 voucher gave me the opportunity to not to worry about the rent anymore. It gave me time to study. I took classes to get a liberal arts degree, a bachelor degree in human services. And I am now a few classes away from a master's degree in children education. I volunteered as an English and a reading tutor in Richfield, where I live. I was an assistant community organizer at Crossroad. I felt like I was at home because I lived there for 15 years. Then a landlord bought the building and threw out Section 8 tenant. I moved into another building. Section 8 building, likewise. The same thing happened. After a couple of years, I found out Aon had bought Season Park apartments in Richfield. And I decided to apply. Therefore, I applied and I qualified. Now, this apartment that Aon bought, he fixed it so that no other landlord could come in and buy this building and throw out Section 8 tenant. That's what I'm talking about. I have lived here now for almost 6 years, and I finally feel like I'm at home. At my age, knowing I'm not going to have to move again, it's a safe haven. It's a peace of mind. You need to know you're not going to have to worry about the rent. You need to know that just because you are poor, you still matter. Having a house voucher means that I can give back to my community. It means that I can get an education. It means that I can grow. And there are thousands of other Minnesota who could have that same opportunity. If you would pass this bill, I ask you to support and pass House 511. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Thank you again.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, audience. We want to make sure that we can hear everyone's testimony, but we do appreciate the enthusiasm. The next testifier on the list is Dana Hiltunen.
Chair, if I might just quickly thank Jerlene and wish her happy birthday.
Yes.
And just let Jerlene know that I don't know if I would be in this position as the housing sheriff not getting to know Jerlene. I met Jerlene when she was a tenant organizer, when she mentioned when I was a young city council member in Richfield. She called me about once a week and helped educate me and become such a strong advocate for housing. I'm so glad she's spending her birthday with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lean. Dana Hiltunen, please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Howard and members of the committee. I'm not sure how I got put after Darlene. Kind of feeling a little boring now, but we'll see how this goes. So my name is Dana Hiltunen. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia and Evelyn Housing and Redevelopment Authorities, and I'm testing today on behalf of Minnesota NARO. Minnesota NARO represents over 140 housing authorities across the state, which provide affordable housing and support livable communities for Minnesotans through a variety of programs funded by federal, state, and local resources. One of the key programs is the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which you've heard of referred to as Section 8, which serves over 31,000 households across the state. Rental assistance helps very low-income households afford housing, resulting in greater job stability and higher school achievement. On average, families are able to stabilize to a point where they can afford their rent without assistance in 3 years. The proposed Bring It Home Minnesota program is modeled after the voucher program. By modeling the program after the existing voucher program, Bring It Home will utilize existing delivery systems already in place with experienced providers. Currently, there are not enough vouchers to serve eligible households, and many of our local programs maintain waiting lists. The Virginia HRA operates the voucher program in northern St. Louis County. Our service area is a rural area spanning from Ely to west of Hibbing and Cotton to north of Orr. As of today, we are serving 510 households with vouchers. Our public-private partnership worked with 193 private landlords in 2022. Last year, our HRA did not have enough funds to support the vouchers that were in use, and in my 10 years since 2012 at the HRA, we have never had enough funding to support all 588 vouchers we should be able to issue under the program. In addition, we currently have 523 households on our waiting list, with an average of 78 applications being accepted on a monthly basis. We are utilizing all of our vouchers and simply do not have enough to fund the need in northern St. Louis County. In the metro area, housing authorities have to limit the number of applicants they place on their waiting lists in order to be able to serve them in a timely manner, meaning 3 to 5 years. However, the number of applicants far exceeds the slots available. Both St. Paul PHA and Metro HRA opened their waiting lists in 2022. Metro received 11,000 applications for 2,000 waiting list slots. St. Paul PHA received 6,000 applications for their 2,000 waiting slots. In addition to being beneficial to working families, rental assistance strengthens communities. Property owners in urban, suburban, and rural Minnesota communities use rental assistance payments to pay property taxes and maintain their properties in good condition. This private-public collaboration is a vital piece to providing affordable housing in thriving communities. Besides being an administrator of the voucher program, I am also a past recipient. When I was in elementary school, my mother and I lived in an unstable housing condition. My single mother worked multiple jobs, and we still needed assistance to make housing feasible for us. This was obviously several years ago, and the main difference I see from then to today was that when our small family needed help, my mother was able to walk into the HRA that I am now the executive director at and received a voucher immediately to look for housing. This voucher kept us from living in a dangerous situation, provided stability, and kept me in the same school district during a very difficult time. I know that I was able to do well in school and had numerous opportunities because of this help. When I hear the struggles and how long families need to wait for stable housing, I know that I am fortunate this wasn't the case for me. 35 years ago, we did better for my family, and I know we can do better for families needing housing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hilton. The last testifier we have on our list is Temi Ogunrinde. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here again. My name is Tami. As you remember, I'm the Equity and Engagement Director at Urban Homeworks, Vice Chair Agbaje, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding House File 11. Thank you, Chair Howard, and to each representative for moving this bill forward and the opportunity to testify on behalf of Urban Homeworks, our residents, and larger community in support of House File 11. Urban Homeworks is a nonprofit focused on affordable housing. We work to ensure families in North Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, and St. Paul have safe, dignified housing that they can afford. We know firsthand that the need for affordable housing is great, but we cannot do it alone. House File 11 alleviates the burdensome reality of paying more than 30% of your income on housing, whether they live in affordable housing or not. Because we know that even in housing that is considered affordable by HUD standards, families are still house burdened. As one of the few people of color in this room, I have to point out, time after time, our elected officials tout the importance of equity in our state, but stay complacent to inequitable practices and systemic racism. Allow me to break down the reality of how our systems benefit our white Minnesotans far greater than our BIPOC Minnesotans. Minnesota provides a subsidy to homeowners through the mortgage interest deduction. This subsidy disproportionately benefits white Minnesotans due to the disparities between white homeownership and BIPOC homeownership. However, funding toward rent subsidies are largely underfunded, a subsidy that would greatly benefit BIPOC families. Now is the opportunity for every legislator, regardless of political affiliation, to support true equity in the state of Minnesota or run the risk of showing that your words of support toward equity are hollow and performative. Simply put, supporting House File 11 is not only equitable, but the right thing to do. This bill has impact beyond North Minneapolis, beyond the Twin Cities, and beyond the metro area. A 2021 study done by Minnesota Housing Partnership showed that there is a high percentage of Minnesotans who are house burdened in Hennepin, Anoka, and Ramsey. However, there are higher concentrations of house burdened Minnesotans in the Itasca, Beltrami, Clay, Rice, and other greater Minnesota counties. Let me break it down further to some of your specific jurisdictions. Representative Dotseth, 43.6% of your constituents spend more than 30% of their income towards rent. For Representative Nash, 43.3%, Petersburg, 52.7%, and Myers, 52.3%. Supporting House File 11 is an opportunity to think beyond your families and friends and to think of the hardworking Minnesotans who are in need of real support and voted you in to provide that. The impact that House File 11 would have on Minnesota families is generational. With families only paying 30% of their income towards rent, they have the opportunity to pay for health care and other basic needs. It allows Minnesotans to never have to worry about choosing between paying for rent or putting food on the table. When you have stability you start to dream, you can begin to do things like build an emergency savings fund, save for a down payment, or your child's college tuition. Last week, Representative Nash spoke to wanting to be able to see the fruit of his labor, and I don't fault him. I genuinely do too. But my hope is that each representative will desire that for their constituents just as much as they desire it for themselves. The reality is there are too many hardworking Minnesotans who have been unable to see the fruits of their labor due to skyrocketing rent and unaffordable housing. I would love for you all to just imagine with me. What if we created a Minnesota where the majority of the population isn't simply surviving? A Minnesota where the majority of hardworking Minnesotans are stable, and from that stability are able to now dream of what thriving looks like for themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to call to see if there's any public testimony from the audience. All right, not seeing any, we will move on to member discussion, but I also understand that there's an amendment from Representative Johnson, is that correct?
Chair Bajai, I do have an amendment. I can go through and explain it again, or we can just repeat what happened on the last bill. This is the exact same amendment. It's the A5 amendment. I'm going to move that. Again, we need to look at, make sure this grant fund money is spent properly, to get into the hands of those who need it, instead of going elsewhere. We have an issue not just in Minneapolis and in the metro area. We have rental and affordable housing issues across the state. When an apartment complex or apartment building is built in my community, before the shovel goes in the ground, all the units are filled. Housing providers are looking at those situations. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of units built, but there is nothing available to rent right now. We have, like I say, I want to make sure that the funds are going where they need to go. Again, requires if it does go to a nonprofit, and we do have some housing authorities that are nonprofits, to make sure that the 990s are given not only to the legislature, the committees of jurisdiction, but also to the Attorney General's office, so that he can see what's going on, and if the things don't look properly, you can look into more issues to make sure that the funds are being used properly. Also have time to have rules and regulations and policies in place to make sure that there is proper oversight to these grants. I will stop there because I could go on and on and on. I have the report with me, and I do ask that all the members do read it because there's a lot of good information in it.
Thank you, Representative Johnson, for your amendment. Are there other members that would like to speak to the amendment? All right, seeing no further discussion, or Chair Howard, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just briefly, Chair Bajai, I would ask members to oppose the amendment. I do think program integrity and accountability is important, and so I would like to work if there's ways we can improve the bill in that way, but this amendment does have some challenges. And again, I think is a bit of a round peg in a square hole. In particular, the 1% and 2% administrative pieces would be a big burden and challenge on the local public housing authorities to administer this program. It is a very labor-intensive, human-intensive endeavor to sort of do that casework and make the payment to the landlord. Putting those kinds of burdens would really make the program inoperable. In terms of the bill really envisions that local public housing authorities would be administering these programs and not nonprofits. So I would ask members to oppose the amendment.
Representative Johnson.
Chair Bajai, Representative Howard, I do appreciate your comments on this amendment. I do look at the 1% and 2% administrative costs as a way to get the funds out there. That way it also requires local buy-in with the local authorities actually participating in it instead of just going off the state dollars.
Representative Howard, any other comments? Any other member comments to the amendment? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move to the vote. Representative Johnson puts forward his amendment. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no.
No.
The motion does not prevail. Closing comments, or member discussion, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I do have a list going, so Representative Petersburg, I'll put you on the list. Thank you. Representative Johnson's already on the list, but Representative Nash was first, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, a couple questions. So this is a $4 billion biennial request. We have approximately a $17.6 billion surplus currently. Of that, 12 billion, give or take, is one-time money. So your request would effectively eat it would eat up 4 of the $5 billion surplus, but that's only if we continue to run a surplus. How do you plan on paying for this if we don't have that remaining $5 billion surplus?
Representative Howard.
Representative Nash, first, with your math, we have enough. We can do the whole enchilada. But to be frank, it is a big dollar amount, and it has to be considered in the context of our entire budget. So we can look at ways to sort of scale this in terms of which populations we want to serve. But I think there's value in taking the full picture and seeing what that would fully cost to do, and the benefits of doing so.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, there wasn't really much of an answer there, Mr. Chair. I mean, you could do it if it was one-time money. But if we go into an economic downturn, there's no mechanism other than raising taxes here on how to do that if you were to do your full request.
Representative Howard.
It is ongoing. To a program like this that is ongoing, you wouldn't really be able to utilize one-time dollars. That's correct. Again, I would say, though, you look at a fiscal note, as I kind of mentioned in my comments, it carries those costs, but it does not look at the other side of the ledger, at the sort of economic benefits, the reduced spending we'd see in other ways in our state budget. So it isn't quite a simple arithmetic that just looking at the fiscal note would indicate.
And Madam Chair,
Representative Nash.
thank you. Remind me real quick, what's the referral on this bill?
We're laying this bill over.
Okay. And Madam Chair,
Representative Nash.
thank you. So I guess my first question is, you're going to spend a lot of money. How does this actually impact the inventory of current available housing, period? Because you and I have talked about this, and I've talked about this for a long time, and our members have talked about this. This is assuming that you have current steady state inventory. We still have a housing crisis. We're not building enough starter homes. We're not building enough apartment buildings. We're not actually encouraging investment in that. This does nothing to do that. And I certainly think that this is a subject that's got merit to talk about. Maybe not at $4 billion a year or biennium, but this does nothing to take away our inventory issues. Would you agree with that?
Representative Howard.
Representative Nash, I would agree with that, and it's a good question. And if all we did this session was just do this bill, that wouldn't address the full scope of our affordable housing crisis. And so we absolutely do need to produce more units of affordable housing. And we've heard bills to do that. We're going to hear more. So we do have to be in yes and mode, which is a mantra I've kind of said over and over again.
And just to finish up, Madam Chair.
Representative Nash. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm heartened by that. I'm still waiting to have a conversation when we get to talk about how do we build more starter houses. We haven't done that yet. But just to frame this, the last biennial budget, this ask is roughly 7% of the last biennial budget, and does nothing to impact the inventory that we have. This is a huge ask, and you admitted that on the intro. But I guess I don't want to send false hope to the people who came to this room and have been cheering you on, because in the first 2 seconds of questioning, you said, well, okay, it's a big ask, but we're going to probably have to dial it back because it's not realistic. And I hate trying to dash people's expectations, because you got a lot of applause. You stuck the landing with some of these folks. And I just think it's unfair to throw out this big vision and then the author says, well, okay, guys, here's the deal. We're not really doing this amount of money. I certainly think that there is a conversation to be had with this, but it's not doing anything to fix inventory. So all we're doing is saying in these widget holes that we have, that we're not doing anything to increase the number of places we can put people. And I think that's myopic. And lastly, Mr. Chair, here at the legislature, we are oftentimes gavelled down when we question each other's motives. I would ask that you encourage your testifiers who actually did question our motives as to why we are encouraging certain things. I would have expected that you would have already addressed that.
Representative Nash, I think our testifiers are probably able to kind of speak to broader statements that they're hearing in the public, but I don't see that there was much disparagement per se. Representative Howard.
The only thing I would say to your comment, Representative Nash, is that in terms of why present this vision, we don't do enough, I don't think, in state government in terms of thinking big and thinking outside the box. And we can't accomplish big things unless we put big ideas on the table. And I'm not suggesting that we can snap a finger and realize this vision tomorrow, but by presenting a solution that meets the scope of the challenge, we can set our state on the course to do just that.
Representative Johnson.
Chair Badgley, Chair Howard, I understand the concept of this bill. Housing is an issue across the state. The housing providers are doing everything they can to keep costs down. I noticed in your bill on line 3.18, the appropriation is blank. It could be $1 million, $500,000, $2 billion. We don't know. But whatever that number is, the fiscal note has it costing over $2 million a year with 12.75 state employees to give money to other people to give money out. I guess one question I do have for you, I have some other thoughts as well. But can you tell me why it takes almost 13 people to hand out a grant when we have grant programs already in place?
Representative Howard.
Representative Badgley, the full bill would entail 200,000 vouchers going out into an equitable formula all across the state. And so to the program integrity piece, to your amendment, I think we do want to make sure that we're not shortchanging our agency acting as that pass-through entity to be able to do that. So that number didn't jump off the page to me, to be honest. But from my perspective, we want folks to be in those positions to administer a program well. When we don't have enough resources to administer a program well, we run into problems. And then we hear about the problems on that end. So, we want to make sure that we're adequately funding our agencies and our local housing authorities to administer a program well for Minnesotans and for landlords.
Representative Johnson.
Chair Badgley, Chair Howard, I was just crunching some numbers here. Even if we use $500 million, and you want to use, you didn't think 1% was enough to cover the costs, just at the state level, which, looking at this number, the fiscal note is $4 million. 1% to $500 million is $5 million. More than what my amendment had. And I'm sure we're probably looking at a higher number than that with what you're looking at. I understand this program and what you're looking at doing. Another question I have for Chair Howard is this going to increase the amount of rental stock that we have from the housing providers? And is this going to lower the actual cost, or is this going to shift the cost?
Representative Howard.
Chair Badgley, Representative Johnson, kind of referencing Representative Nash, this bill doesn't increase supply. We absolutely need to do that. A bill we heard earlier this session with housing infrastructure bonds, et cetera, the more holistic approach we can take, the better, but we absolutely do need to produce more homes.
Representative Johnson, any final comments?
Chair Howard, I understand the bill. Haven't decided how I'm going to vote on this yet, because it's still going to be laid over. But I guess another thing that I'd like to see in this bill for these people that are getting these vouchers, and it should be all Section 8 vouchers, and especially for emergency assistance, is that total wraparound services are provided. Now, that's not in this bill. If we don't teach these people how to run a checkbook, how to run a household, how to pay their bills, making sure that they're looking for work if they need that part of it, making sure we're providing them educational services so they can get a decent job. We have thousands of jobs available, and a lot of them are good-paying jobs, but we have a lot of people not qualified. Or they're way overqualified. We don't have in the middle. We need a lot of skilled employees, our carpenters, our plumbers, our electricians, our welders, our manufacturers, and construction people are just begging for those people. So I think we need to look at the holistic view in this and not just give a handout, because all a handout is keep people down. We have to make sure that when we help them, it's a hand up to make them a better person.
Representative Howard, any comments or no?
I want to make time for other members to ask questions.
All right, Representative Dotseth.
Thank you, Representative Bache and Chair Howard. Two-part question, I guess, would be number one is $2 billion. That's an awful lot of B's behind it. There are a lot of zeros right there. I think we'd all have to agree with that. And I appreciate your heart behind this bill. The question is number one would be how much of an increase would this be from where it currently is right now with rental assistance? And number two is accountability. I mean, I'm from Greater Minnesota, and my heart is for making sure that proper resources are going to Greater Minnesota. What mechanisms do we have to oversee this program to make sure that it's managed properly and that there's a proper oversight in this program? Thank you.
Representative Howard.
Chair Agbaje, Representative Dotseth, both good questions. I don't have the exact numbers of what the state currently spends on rental assistance. There are a few programs through Minnesota Housing, through their local trust fund, that they do some direct vouchers. Admittedly, this would be a massive expansion. I would say it's an area where the state hasn't really had much of a role. We've sort of deferred that to the federal government. And I think that's a problem. And so that, to the increase, it'd be a very large increase, and I would say warranted. To the oversight piece, what I would say is, again, because we're utilizing existing infrastructures with our public housing authorities that for years have administered Section 8, and where there is, to the guardrails and those kinds of things, I would be more concerned if we were sort of creating and spending $2 billion on a program that we're sort of setting up from scratch, but we're using local infrastructure that has some of those sort of oversight and guardrail mechanisms in place.
Representative Dotseth.
Thank you, Chair Howard. Well, with that said, have they managed that amount of monies in the past? I understand these. That's a concern I had, which is justifiable, and then Greater Minnesota, to make certain that we have proper proportions directing towards Greater Minnesota as well.
Representative Howard.
Chair Budget, to the last point, we have specific language in the amendment that deals with that equity piece statewide to make sure that these resources are delivered out equitably. That's important. And I think you raise a good point that especially, we want to make sure we're not flipping a switch and asking our local authorities to have a lift that they can't take on, especially maybe our smaller local housing authorities in Greater Minnesota. So we have some flexibility built in, if a handful of Greater Minnesota local authorities want to work together and administer, we have enough flexibility to do that. But that's a really good point, that we don't want to sort of set up our local agencies to fail, so to speak.
Representative Dotseth. Thank you. Representative Petersburg, I apologize.
Thank you. No problem, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, you used the word the bill will be laid over, and I just want to clarify what that means, because I've been in committees where it's meant two different things. One is meant to lay over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. The other one is lay over for later passage and moving on. Which are you considering for this pathway of this particular bill?
Representative Howard.
Representative Peters, laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill.
Representative Petersburg?
Thank you, and thank you for that clarification. So everything that I'm about to say has nothing to do with the merits of rental assistance and the needs that we have to do. So I am here just with concerns about the process and the finances that are there. And the first thing that I see is under, on page 1.13, the definition of eligible household, which the first threshold is that the household has to have an annual income of no more than 50% of the median income in the area. And I'm not sure that's exactly what you meant, because if you have two people in the household, both making minimum wage, and the average income in that particular area is $40,000, they each could be making $25,000 a piece and would no longer be eligible, even though their rental may be 30% or more of the household's income. So you may want to look at that, because I think that may be a point of clarification. The other piece that I do have a question for, and I'm not sure if you can answer it, Mr. Chair, or somebody from fiscal staff, I am curious to know what is the previous biennial's total budget for housing committee's responsibility, if we have that.
House Fiscal.
Chair Balje, Representative Petersburg, the general fund appropriation for Minnesota housing in the current biennium has a current law base of $115 million. The actuals for fiscal year 22 and 23 are $125 million.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you. And I thought it was somewhere in that area, and so thank you for that clarification. This would increase that budget to over $4 billion, which is a big ask. And so my question to you, Mr. Chair, is do you have kind of a wink from the leadership or something that you're going to get that target? Because, I mean, that's a pretty big ask for beyond what you're doing. And not that it's not worth it. Please understand that we certainly could spend it here, but do we know that we're actually going to get something like that?
Representative Howard.
Representative Badje, I wish I had that wink. But what I will say is that I think that we are, there's greater recognition that kind of the status quo of just kind of inching along. Right now, the housing finance budget is 0.3, 0.4% of our state budget. I think that there's a lot of members that I've talked with that think we really ought to bump that up and sort of change the game. And this is a game-changing type of a proposal. We would need a game-changing sort of target in housing to be able to do something of significance. But no, I don't have any sort of wink and a nod yet from the speaker. I wish I did.
Representative Petersburg, final comments.
Yeah, thank you. Just one final comment. I just wish you well in getting that, and I will be looking forward to seeing how this gets fit into your omnibus bill at the end of the time. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Members, before we continue, we have only about an additional 5 minutes, so we'll go quickly through the next 3 members, starting with Representative Kozlowski.
Thank you, Chair Agbaje and Representative Howard. Today was a good day for housing, and I want to say that, on a day where it's housing day on the Hill, that we're laying down the tracks and putting the legs to a stool. We have just talked about Housing Trust Fund that's going to increase supply and allow local communities to tailor it to their communities and needs. We have this Bring It Home rental assistance, and we also have the Pathway to Home bill that is also being worked on, where today we heard that 20-year-olds have the same mortality rate as 50-year-olds because our youth are so highly disproportionately represented in our homeless population, and that's LGBTQ and Black and brown youth. Elders are some of our highest folks that we're seeing experiencing homelessness. If you haven't read the Minnesota Homelessness Mortality Report, encourage you to read that. But I wanted to chime in on folks who are experiencing homelessness are hardworking and brilliant, incredible people. That it's not just about knowing how to manage your money. It's about having systems that put you at the margin and force you to live there. In this data, we can talk about the folks who are working $10 an hour minimum wage has to work 70 hours a week to afford a single bedroom apartment. So I just want to put that into context of who it is that we're talking about. These are our relatives and our loved ones. And today, a really fierce youth named Leah asked us during the Pathways press conference, this is really great. This is dollars that's going to go, to your point, to make sure that our local organizations across the state are serving our communities in equitably, culturally responsive ways and geographically distributed. But she also asked, like, what more are you doing as elected officials? And I was really proud that we were able to stand up there and tell her these 3 things that we were putting forward, that we can't afford to not do it. And one of the things that I'm struck by is that we keep going around and around about the supply and the affordability. And I didn't know until I was reading through the materials that it's my understanding that actually one of the things that holds us up with creating more affordable housing is this aspect between the developers and securing finance for the federal voucher programs. And I'm reading here that it says if every eligible household were to receive a Bring It Home Minnesota voucher, it would expedite the construction of deeply affordable housing across the state, as well as decrease the costs on those emergency shelter and services for folks who are experiencing homelessness and the investments that we're seeking to make. So I'm curious, Chair Howard, if that is accurate, or if you can help us actually, setting forward this trajectory. I appreciate that we're calling out the specific dollar amount that we would need to vision towards, dream towards. And if this is actually part of being able to build towards more affordable housing, it's really exciting. And I thank you for your work.
Representative Howard, any?
Quickly, thank you. You make a very good point. I talked about how we need to increase supply by the sort of tools we have at the legislature, but even by virtue of doing something like this, I think could incent, as you said, the creation, especially of the deeply affordable that's been so hard to build.
Thank you, Representative Kozlowski. Representative Cha.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Howard, for bringing this bill forward and in your leadership in this space. I'm here to affirm that the challenges of housing is true in my community. There are 80,000 Hmong Americans in Minnesota, in which I guarantee you 80% of those had used some kind of housing assistance in the past. I am a recipient of housing vouchers. I'm a refugee from Thailand. I grew up here in St. Paul, on the corner of Dale University. These disparities are real. The insecurity in education, the outcomes, all those are real. We must continue to invest into Minnesotans and families, And I just want to note that the investment that the state of Minnesota made into the Hmong community 48 years ago brought 9 legislators of Hmong descent to the state capitol, and I am one of those. So I want to note here that the investment was well taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Cha. Representative Howard, any final comments?
I'll be brief since I know we're long on time. I really want to thank members on both sides for the discussion on the bill, and thank everyone who came here today. And I'll just end by saying, let's bring it home.
Thank you, Representative Howard. Members, this bill is being laid over as amended.